Chosen one, the person blocking your soulmate was just exposed. The surprising truth will leave you in tears. My beloved child, listen carefully. The person standing between you and your soulmate may have just made one mistake they cannot take back. For a long time, you may have believed the distance came from your soulmate's own decision. You may have wondered why someone who once felt so close suddenly became unreachable. But what if the story you were given was never the complete story? What if someone quietly shaped what your soulmate believed about you, while making sure you never discovered the truth? Something has shifted, and this time, the hidden details are beginning to connect. Before you continue, comment 583 if you feel the truth about this connection is finally coming to light. There was a reason certain conversations never reached you. There was a reason some opportunities disappeared without explanation. There was a reason your soulmate seemed to change whenever another person entered the situation. At first, these moments may have looked unrelated. One strange conversation could be ignored. One delayed message could be explained. One sudden change could be blamed on timing. But when the same pattern happens repeatedly, something deeper deserves attention. Your soulmate may have trusted someone who appeared to know what was best for them. This person may have presented their opinions as protection, wisdom, or concern. They may have said they were trying to prevent heartbreak. They may have warned your soulmate about getting too emotionally involved. They may have created doubt without ever directly telling your soulmate to walk away. That is what made the interference so difficult to recognize. The person did not need to destroy the connection openly. They only needed to place one doubt inside the right conversation. One doubt can become a wall. Your soulmate may have already been developing stronger feelings when this happened. They may have been thinking about you more often, remembering small details, and imagining what could happen if they allowed the connection to grow. Then someone stepped into that vulnerable moment with information that changed their perspective. Maybe they questioned your intentions. Maybe they mentioned something from your past. Maybe they suggested that you were not ready. Maybe they warned your soulmate that getting closer would eventually create pain. Your soulmate listened. And that decision may have changed everything. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. The painful part is that your soulmate may not have realized they were being influenced. They may have believed they were simply protecting themselves. They may have thought stepping away was the mature thing to do. They may have convinced themselves that silence would make everything easier. But silence does not erase feelings. It only hides them. Your soulmate may have continued living normally on the outside, while privately carrying questions they could not answer. They may have wondered why walking away did not bring the peace they expected. They may have tried to focus on other things, but certain memories kept returning at unexpected moments. A familiar place could remind them of you. A song could bring back a conversation. A simple phrase could suddenly reopen an old emotion. They may have wondered why something they supposedly moved beyond still had emotional weight. That question became important. Because eventually, your soulmate started noticing something unusual. The person who had advised them to stay away from you seemed unusually interested in whether they were still thinking about you. That did not make sense. If the connection was truly harmless, why was someone else still monitoring it? If your soulmate had truly made the right decision, why did this person seem nervous whenever your name appeared? Those questions may have started quietly, but they began changing the entire picture. Your soulmate may have remembered conversations they once ignored. They may have realized that certain warnings always appeared at very specific moments. Whenever they became closer to you, someone created a reason to hesitate. Whenever they began trusting you, another concern suddenly appeared. The timing was too precise. And now, your soulmate may be looking backward with completely different eyes. This is where the person who interfered made their biggest mistake. They assumed your soulmate would never compare the stories. They assumed your soulmate would keep trusting their version of events. They assumed the past would remain buried. But one unexpected detail may have challenged everything. Your soulmate may have discovered that something they were told about you was simply not true. That single discovery could have opened a door. Then another contradiction appeared. Then another. Suddenly, the person who once seemed trustworthy had questions to answer. Your soulmate may have asked where certain information came from. They may have asked why they were never encouraged to speak directly with you. They may have asked why someone always seemed to have an explanation ready whenever you became part of the conversation. And this time, they were not asking casually. They wanted answers. That changes everything. Because someone who has been comfortable controlling a story becomes uncomfortable when the listener starts asking precise questions. The person may have tried to explain. They may have changed the subject. They may have said they were only trying to help. But your soulmate may have noticed something even more revealing. The explanation did not match the timeline. Something happened before the warning. Something was said before the distance. Something was known before your soulmate was supposed to know it. And that means the interference may have started much earlier than you ever imagined. There is a possibility that this person noticed the bond between you and your soulmate before either of you fully understood its depth. They saw something changing. They noticed your soulmate becoming emotionally different. They noticed your presence affecting their decisions. They noticed your soulmate becoming less dependent on their opinions. And that may have frightened them. Not because you were dangerous. Because your connection threatened their influence. That is a very different kind of motive. Your soulmate may now be realizing that the person they trusted was not simply afraid of you. They were afraid of losing their position in your soulmate's life. And once that truth becomes visible, every old conversation starts sounding different. The concern starts sounding like control. The warning starts sounding like fear. The advice starts sounding like influence. The silence starts sounding intentional. But there is still one detail your soulmate has not fully uncovered. Someone may have known exactly what your soulmate felt for you, long before your soulmate admitted it to themselves. And that person may have used that knowledge to create the distance you experienced. The shocking part is not only what they did. It is what they may have been trying to prevent your soulmate from discovering about themselves. Because the deeper your soulmate looks into this mystery, the more they may realize that the real obstacle was never simply another person. It was the version of themselves they became while listening to that person's voice. And once that realization reaches them, they will have to face a question they have avoided for a very long time. What would their life look like if they had trusted their own heart instead? The answer to that question may have become impossible for your soulmate to avoid. They may have started revisiting the exact moment when everything changed between you. At the time, they probably believed they were making a careful decision. Now, they may realize that their decision was built around information they never independently verified. That realization can shake someone deeply, because it forces them to separate their own feelings from someone else's influence. Your soulmate may remember how naturally things once felt between you. There may have been a comfort they could not explain, even during ordinary conversations. They may have felt understood without needing to explain every part of themselves. They may have noticed that your presence brought out emotions they usually kept hidden. Then the outside voice became louder. Slowly, they began questioning what once felt natural. They may have started analyzing every interaction with you, searching for problems that were never actually there. A harmless action may have suddenly looked suspicious. A delayed response may have seemed intentional. A simple misunderstanding may have been presented as evidence that the connection would eventually fail. That is how doubt grows. It does not always arrive as one huge lie. Sometimes, it arrives through many small suggestions. Your soulmate may now understand that those suggestions changed their behavior. They became more guarded. They stopped saying what they really felt. They may have avoided certain conversations because they feared confirming the feelings they were trying to suppress. And you were left seeing only the distance. You could not see the conversation happening behind it. You could not hear the warnings. You could not know which details had been changed before they reached your soulmate. That is why this revelation can feel so emotional. You were responding to the behavior, while your soulmate was responding to a story. Those two realities were never the same. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. Now something unexpected may have happened. Your soulmate may have encountered a situation that directly contradicted what they were told about you. It could have been something small, but emotionally significant. Maybe they heard your name in a conversation where the facts were different from what they remembered. Maybe they discovered that an important event happened differently than they had been told. One detail opened the door. Then another followed. Your soulmate may have started asking questions privately, without telling the person who had influenced them. They may have searched through old messages, remembered previous conversations, or contacted someone who knew what actually happened. And what they found may have left them stunned. The story was incomplete. Some details had been exaggerated. Some details had been left out. And one particular detail may have been deliberately framed to make you look different from who you really were. That discovery could explain why your soulmate suddenly became quieter around the person who had interfered. They were watching. They were listening. They were testing whether another contradiction would appear. The person may not have noticed immediately, but your soulmate did. This is where the emotional power of the situation changes. Your soulmate is no longer simply remembering you. They are investigating the truth about what happened to you. And that means their feelings are no longer being filtered through someone else's interpretation. For the first time, they are looking at the entire story themselves. They may discover that you were never given a fair opportunity to explain your side. They may realize that certain decisions were made before you were even allowed to speak. They may understand that they judged your intentions without asking you what you actually meant. That realization can create a painful kind of regret. Because your soulmate may suddenly see your silence differently. What they once interpreted as distance may have actually been confusion. What they once interpreted as indifference may have been hurt. What they once interpreted as rejection may have been your attempt to respect the space they seem to want. Your soulmate may realize that both of you were reacting to misunderstandings created outside the connection. That is when the emotional wall begins to crack. But there is something even more important happening. Your soulmate may finally be angry with themselves. Not because they stopped caring. Because they allowed someone else to speak louder than their own experience. They may wonder why they did not ask you directly. They may wonder why they accepted assumptions without checking the facts. They may wonder how much time was lost because they trusted someone else's interpretation. Those questions can become painful at night. Especially when they remember moments when they wanted to reach out but stopped themselves. There may have been a message they typed and deleted. A meeting they almost arranged. A conversation they wanted to start. A moment when they saw your name and chose not to respond. At the time, they may have thought they were protecting themselves. Now, those moments may feel like missed opportunities. The person who influenced them cannot undo those moments. Neither can your soulmate. But your soulmate can finally understand them. And understanding creates responsibility. They may realize that if they ever approach you again, they cannot pretend nothing happened. They cannot simply return with a casual message and expect the past to disappear. They will need to tell you why they left. They will need to explain what they believed. They will need to admit who influenced them. And most importantly, they will need to acknowledge what their silence did to you. That is a much harder conversation than simply saying, "I missed you." Missing someone is easy to admit. Explaining why you hurt them requires courage. Your soulmate may be preparing for that courage now. But before they approach you, another confrontation may happen. The person who interfered may sense that their influence is slipping away. They may notice your soulmate becoming less responsive to their advice. They may notice that certain conversations no longer create the same reaction. They may realize that the old methods are failing. And when influence begins disappearing, people sometimes reveal themselves without realizing it. A question may be asked too quickly. A defensive statement may reveal hidden knowledge. A detail may slip out that they were never supposed to know. Your soulmate may catch it. That one sentence could expose more than a confession ever could. Because suddenly, your soulmate may understand that this person knew much more than they admitted. They knew about your connection. They knew about certain conversations. They may even have known how deeply your soulmate cared. And if they knew all of that while encouraging distance, the motive becomes much harder to explain. Your soulmate may confront them directly. The conversation could begin calmly. Then the questions become sharper. Why did you tell me that? Why did you leave that part out? Why did you make me believe something that was not true? And eventually, the question that matters most may be asked. Why did you want me away from this person? The answer could be the moment everything changes. Because the person may finally reveal that their fear was never really about you. It was about losing control. They may admit that they believed your soulmate would change if they became closer to you. They may admit they were afraid of becoming less important. They may confess that they thought the connection would pull your soulmate away from the life they had become comfortable with. And your soulmate may hear something they never expected. The person may say they thought they were protecting them. But protection without consent can become control. Your soulmate may finally understand that difference. That could be the moment the emotional chain breaks. Not because someone wins an argument. Because your soulmate finally recognizes that their choices belong to them. And once that truth becomes clear, they may begin thinking about you with a completely different question. Not whether they should forget you. Not whether the connection was real. But whether you would still be willing to hear the truth after everything that happened. That question may be the reason they hesitate before reaching out. They may fear that too much time has passed. They may fear you have healed. They may fear that you no longer trust them. And that fear is understandable. But this time, there is something different. They are no longer running from their feelings. They are running toward the courage required to face the consequences. That is a major shift. Your soulmate may eventually understand that the hardest part is not finding you again. The hardest part is standing in front of you without excuses. And when that moment comes, one confession may reveal why this entire situation became so complicated. Because the person who blocked your soulmate may have known one truth that your soulmate themselves were afraid to admit. They knew your soulmate had already fallen emotionally deeper than they were willing to acknowledge. And they were terrified that once your soulmate admitted it, nothing they said would matter anymore. That fear may explain why the interference became stronger exactly when your soulmate's feelings became harder to hide. The person standing nearby could sense something changing, and they understood that once your soulmate admitted the truth, their influence would become much weaker. So they acted before that realization became permanent. Your soulmate may now see that timing clearly. The closer they became to accepting their feelings, the more resistance appeared around them. A new warning would arrive. Another concern would suddenly surface. Someone would remind them of an old mistake. Someone would question your intentions again. It always happened at the wrong moment. That pattern may have been invisible before. Now it looks obvious. Your soulmate may remember one particular conversation that changed their behavior toward you. They may remember exactly what was said, where they were, and how quickly their emotions shifted afterward. At the time, they accepted the warning because it seemed believable. Today, they may question every word. They may wonder why nobody encouraged them to ask you directly. That question can become painful. Because if the person truly wanted to protect your soulmate, why did they never encourage an honest conversation between you? Why was distance always presented as the safest answer? Why did separation seem more important than understanding? Those questions may have exposed the real problem. The person was not simply offering advice. They were controlling the direction of the story. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. Your soulmate may now understand that the biggest damage was not the distance itself. It was the false belief created around that distance. They thought they were walking away because they had discovered something important about you. But what if they were actually walking away because someone else wanted them to? That realization can change how they remember everything. They may start questioning the moments when they acted cold. They may remember seeing disappointment in your eyes and still choosing silence. They may remember opportunities to explain themselves, but they stayed quiet because they believed they were doing the responsible thing. Now those choices may feel completely different. Your soulmate may realize that you were never given the chance to defend yourself against something you did not even know existed. That can create a deep emotional weight. They may begin wondering how you survived the confusion. They may wonder whether you blamed yourself. They may wonder if you eventually believed they never cared. And that thought could hurt more than anything else. Because they may know the truth now. They did care. They simply allowed fear and outside influence to control what they did with those feelings. That distinction matters. But it does not erase the consequences. Your soulmate may understand that love cannot be measured only by private feelings. It is also measured by choices, courage, communication, and responsibility. They may have felt deeply for you. But they did not protect the connection when it mattered. Now they may want to correct that. However, there is another problem. You may not be waiting in the same emotional place anymore. Your soulmate may sense that. They may realize that time changed you. You learn to live without answers. You learn to continue without their presence. You learn to stop chasing explanations that never arrived. And that may be frightening for them. Because the person they once assumed would always remain emotionally available may now have boundaries. They may wonder whether they waited too long. That fear could be the reason they have not reached out yet. Not because they stopped caring. Because they know they cannot return casually. They would have to return honestly. They would have to risk hearing something they do not want to hear. They may have to accept that you have every right to question them. And that is where their emotional growth becomes visible. For the first time, they may be thinking less about what they want from you and more about what they owe you emotionally. That is a powerful transformation. Your soulmate may realize that an apology is not enough if it only makes them feel better. A real apology must recognize what you experienced. It must acknowledge the confusion, the silence, and the damage caused by decisions made without giving you the full truth. They may need to tell you exactly what happened. Not a polished version. Not a comfortable version. The real version. That could include details you never expected to hear. They may tell you who spoke to them. They may tell you what they were warned about. They may reveal which part of the story they believed. They may admit that they wanted to contact you but were repeatedly discouraged. And one detail could leave you completely silent. They may confess that there was a moment when they almost chose you anyway. They almost reached out. They almost ignored the warning. They almost followed what they felt. But then someone intervened again. That final interruption may have been the moment your connection changed direction. Your soulmate may remember it clearly. They may remember holding their phone. They may remember writing something. They may remember deciding to send it. Then someone said something that made them stop. That tiny moment could have created months of distance. You may never have known. They may have carried that memory alone. Until now. Now they may finally understand that the decision was not based on the complete truth. That is why the exposure could become emotional for everyone involved. The person who interfered may feel defensive. Your soulmate may feel betrayed. And you may feel something unexpected. Relief. Not because the pain was good. Because the confusion finally has a name. For a long time, you may have asked yourself whether you imagined the connection. You may have wondered whether the closeness meant anything. You may have questioned whether your soulmate ever felt what you felt. Now the answer may become much clearer. Your connection was not imaginary. But the story surrounding it was distorted. That difference can heal something inside you. You do not need to rewrite the past. You only need to understand it accurately. And once your soulmate understands it too, the future becomes a matter of honest choice. This is where the person who interfered may make one final attempt to regain control. They may remind your soulmate of everything that could go wrong. They may bring up old fears. They may question whether you can really be trusted. They may say that nothing has changed. But your soulmate may finally respond differently. They may say that they need to decide for themselves. That sentence could be the beginning of the end for the interference. Because the person who once influenced every decision now has to watch your soulmate take ownership of their own life. They cannot choose anymore. They can only watch. And your soulmate may finally understand that real love cannot be built around someone else's permission. They may begin creating boundaries. They may stop sharing private details. They may refuse to discuss you through another person. They may insist on speaking to you directly. That final decision could create a completely different emotional atmosphere. There may still be fear. There may still be uncertainty. But now, the uncertainty belongs to the two people involved. That is healthier. Because you and your soulmate can finally respond to reality instead of someone else's version of it. And perhaps this is why the truth had to come out before another conversation could happen. Your soulmate needed to know what actually happened. You needed to know why the distance existed. And the person who created the confusion needed to lose the ability to control the narrative. Now the story is exposed. But the emotional consequence is only beginning. Because your soulmate may soon have to make the hardest choice of all. They may have to decide whether to remain comfortable with the past or risk everything by telling you the truth. And if they choose the truth, they will have to face the one question they have avoided longer than any other. Will you still recognize the person they are now, after everything they allowed to happen? That question may be the very thing keeping your soulmate awake tonight. They may know what they need to say, but they may not know how you will receive it. They may fear that the truth will arrive too late. They may fear that your heart has already learned how to live without them. They may even wonder whether you would believe anything they say after so much silence. But something inside them is changing. They are no longer asking how to avoid the consequences. They are asking how to face them. That difference matters more than you realize. For the first time, your soulmate may be preparing themselves for a conversation where they cannot hide behind circumstances. They cannot blame timing. They cannot blame confusion. They cannot blame the person who interfered and walk away from their own responsibility. They have to admit that they listened. They have to admit that they hesitated. They have to admit that they allowed someone else to influence a decision that belonged to them. That admission may be painful, but it could also become the most honest moment they have experienced in this entire connection. Your soulmate may be replaying your last meaningful interaction in their mind. They may remember details you thought they forgot. The tone of your voice. The expression on your face. The exact words you used when you sensed something was changing. They remember more than you think. And now those memories may be carrying a different meaning. A moment they once considered ordinary may suddenly feel like a warning they ignored. A moment when you tried to understand their behavior may now feel heartbreaking because they realize you were asking questions they were not emotionally brave enough to answer. That realization can bring tears. Not dramatic tears. Private tears. The kind that come when someone finally understands the consequences of their own silence. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. There may also be another person who knows part of the truth. Someone who witnessed a conversation, noticed the interference, or understood what was happening before your soulmate did. This person may have remained silent because they did not want to become involved. But now, circumstances may force that silence to end. A small piece of information could come forward at exactly the right moment. Your soulmate may hear something that confirms what they have already begun to suspect. Suddenly, the story becomes impossible to dismiss. The person who blocked the connection may have told different versions of the same event to different people. They may have changed certain details depending on who was listening. They may have believed nobody would compare those stories. But people eventually compare stories. And when they do, contradictions become evidence. Your soulmate may discover that something they believed was a private truth was actually a carefully shaped narrative. That discovery could be devastating. Because it means the person they trusted was not simply mistaken. They were influencing the outcome. Your soulmate may confront them again, but this time there will be less emotion and more certainty. They may not need to shout. They may not need to argue. They may simply ask questions and wait for honest answers. That calmness can be more powerful than anger. The person may try to defend themselves. They may say they were protecting your soulmate. They may say they were afraid you would hurt them. They may claim that everything they did came from concern. But your soulmate may finally ask the question that exposes the deepest truth. If you cared about protecting me, why did you keep me from making my own decision? There may be silence. And sometimes silence answers more than words. Your soulmate may understand that they were not being protected from you. They were being protected from making a choice that someone else did not want them to make. That realization could permanently change the relationship between them and the person who interfered. But it may also change your soulmate's relationship with themselves. They may realize they have spent too much time living according to other people's expectations. They may have avoided difficult choices because they wanted everyone around them to remain comfortable. Now they understand the price. Comfort cost them honesty. Fear cost them time. And silence cost them a connection they were not ready to lose. That is why their next move may feel different. They may stop asking others what they should do. They may stop searching for permission. They may start asking themselves what they truly want. And when they answer that question honestly, your name may be connected to an emotion they never completely released. But there is something your soulmate must understand before approaching you. They cannot expect the old connection to simply restart. Too much happened. Too much remained unexplained. You may need time. You may need answers. You may need to see consistency before trusting their words. And your soulmate may finally be ready to understand that. They may realize that returning is not about getting immediate forgiveness. It is about earning the right to be heard. That is a much deeper form of love. It requires patience. It requires humility. It requires accepting that you may not respond exactly as they hope. Your soulmate may have once believed that loving you meant protecting themselves from uncertainty. Now they may understand that loving someone also means being brave enough to communicate when uncertainty appears. That lesson could be the greatest consequence of everything that happened. The person who blocked the connection may have created distance, but that distance forced your soulmate to confront their emotional weakness. They discovered what fear made them do. They discovered how easily outside opinions could influence them. And they discovered how painful it becomes when you ignore your own truth. Now they have a chance to become different. Not because someone demanded it. Because they finally understand why they need to change. That is why the next conversation may carry a completely different energy. Your soulmate may not begin with romance. They may begin with truth. They may say they owe you an explanation. They may tell you that something happened that you never knew about. They may admit that another person influenced what they believed. They may finally tell you what they were warned about. And then they may reveal the part that hurts them most. They believed it. For a while. They may tell you that they regret not coming directly to you. They may admit that they allowed fear to become stronger than trust. They may confess that there were moments when they wanted to reach out but stopped themselves. And then they may tell you why. Not because they stopped caring. Because they were afraid of what would happen if they discovered their feelings were real. That confession could leave you speechless. Because suddenly, the distance has a completely different meaning. You may realize that your soulmate was fighting something you never knew existed. And they may realize that you were carrying pain they never understood. Two people may finally discover that they were hurting at the same time, but for completely different reasons. That realization can become emotional. It can also become healing. But there is still one hidden detail. The person who interfered may have known about one specific moment between you and your soulmate, a moment your soulmate never told anyone else about. And when that detail finally comes up, your soulmate may realize that the interference was far more personal than they ever imagined. That revelation could expose the true reason this person wanted the connection to disappear. And when your soulmate discovers that reason, they may finally understand why this entire situation had to be uncovered before they could return to you. The hidden detail may finally explain everything. The person who interfered was not only afraid of losing influence. They were afraid your soulmate would discover that the connection between you had already become too important to control. That is why they reacted so strongly. They saw something your soulmate was still trying to understand. They saw your soulmate becoming emotionally attached. They saw a future beginning to form. And instead of allowing that future to develop naturally, they tried to redirect it. But their plan failed. Because the truth survived every attempt to bury it. Your soulmate may now understand that the person they trusted was never capable of deciding what their heart should feel. That realization may hurt, but it also gives them something they did not have before. Freedom. They are finally free to look at you without someone else's story standing between you. They are finally free to ask what they should have asked long ago. What was real between us? And the answer may be impossible to ignore. You were never the problem. The confusion was. The hidden influence was. The fear was. The silence was. But the connection itself was never given a fair opportunity to speak. Now it can. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. Your soulmate may eventually come forward with the truth, but this time, they may not ask you to forget what happened. They may understand that trust must be rebuilt through consistent actions. They may apologize without excuses. They may explain without blaming others. They may listen without defending themselves. And that could be the moment you realize how much has changed. The person who once allowed someone else to influence their choices may finally be standing in front of you as their own person. That is the real exposure. The person who blocked your soulmate was exposed, but so was the fear that once controlled your soulmate. And once fear loses its authority, love finally gets a chance to speak honestly. Maybe your story does not need a dramatic ending. Maybe it needs an honest beginning. A conversation. A confession. A truth that should have been spoken much earlier. If that moment comes, remember your worth. Do not chase. Do not beg. Do not prove yourself. Let your soulmate show you through actions that they are ready. Because the right connection does not require you to compete with another person's influence. It requires two people brave enough to choose honestly. And if your soulmate chooses that truth, the tears may finally come, not because you are broken, but because you finally understand why the past hurt so deeply. You were never imagining the connection. You were simply missing the truth. Now the truth has been exposed. If this message touched your heart, share what you feel in the comments. Give this video a like, share it with someone who needs this message, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for the next story. And if you are ready to release the confusion, welcome the truth, and trust your journey, write your faith below.